Tennessee number 13 in the college football playoff ranking. Did you have any major concern with Tennessee? If somebody asked me just off the street, so what do you think of Tennessee this year if you had to rank them with all the other schools? I'd say they feel like about a top 15 program to me. I'm not sure I would say top 10 to 15 program until I see a little bit more of Joe Milton, but I would say a top 15 program. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I think top 15 program is perfect. And I think if Tennessee splits the next two games, which I think that's the most logical prediction most people would say, right? Then they're going to finish a top 15 program this year. And I think that Tennessee, they're number 13. They're the highest ranked two-loss team. I'm sorry, they're the second highest ranked two-loss team this year in football. Oregon State is the highest at number 12. And then it's a bunch of one-loss teams that I don't think will remain one-loss teams. Now, to me, the crazy part of the playoff, and we'll get to Tennessee because there is an outside shot at Tennessee getting into the playoff.
Tell me how that has to happen really quick because I know you got everybody excited for Mizzou over the weekend.
Well, you first need Ole Miss to beat Georgia this weekend. That is number one. We'll get to the rooting interest later in this week, but you need Ole Miss to beat Georgia. And you probably, honestly, I would have said Michigan or Ohio State to lose two games, but I got to be honest. If Michigan beats Penn State and then Michigan loses to Ohio State, given the fact that Ohio State is undefeated, I think the Big Ten will be a little bit happy to go ahead and come down with a punishment. And maybe the one-loss Michigan will just be banned from the playoff. Maybe that's
So here's your breakdown. If you don't have it in front of you, if you're in your car or whatever, be sure and leave us a review on our podcast. It makes it show up for more people. Hit the like and subscribe button. We really appreciate that. And we've got a special announcement coming up. As you've noticed, unlike some other YouTube people, I don't say, hey, throw us $4.99. Be great. We're going to find a way for you to give back in better ways because truth be told, YouTube takes that money. And I'd rather it go to different places. All right. So, but the college football playoff ranking is Ohio State 1, Georgia 2, Michigan 3, Florida State 4, Washington at 5, Oregon at 6, Texas 7, Alabama 8, Ole Miss 9, Penn State 10, Louisville 11, Oregon State at 12, then Tennessee at 13. How many of those teams ahead of Tennessee would you say they would beat on a neutral field?
Oregon State, Louisville, Penn State, Ole Miss.
I would go the 9. I'm not trying to take the easy way out, but I would go the 9, 10, 11, 12. The teams right in front of them: Ole Miss, Penn State, Louisville, and Oregon State.
I would go that too. Those are the four. Those are the four I think Tennessee.
Now, I could make a strong argument for Alabama, but since that game was just played, it would make me look stupid. Same way it looked stupid last year for the college football playoff committee to have Alabama over Tennessee, even though Tennessee just beat it.
Anyway, put it this way. I think Tennessee Tennessee, the way they're playing right now, is capable of beating anybody on a newoutral field. Anybody. That doesn't mean they would.
Yeah, that's another level. So I want to get to could
they
be.
Would. Yeah, they
That's
would
be. Would beat Penn State, Louisville, Oregon State, and Ole Miss, right? We agree on that?
Right.
Could beat. Well, obviously, you could beat Alabama. You did it for a half. You could beat Texas. You could beat Oregon. And we're talking neutral field. Could beat Washington. Could beat Florida State. That's where I would draw the line. And I've got another level that I'll share with you. But what do you think about the could beats?
I think they could beat anybody on a neutral field. And the reason, and that includes Georgia and Ohio State and Michigan. And the reason I say that is largely because, again, look, Georgia is playing down to opponents a lot this year. You're telling me that they're not capable of slipping up against a Tennessee team that is just Tennessee is rolling right now on offense. And I think people are underestimating just how good Tennessee looks on offense right now.
So we got a coulda, shoulda. Here, how about a woulda? Would need some help. Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan. If those teams show up and play their best game, you're probably not going to beat them.
You're not. Well, no, you're not beating them if they play their best game. But I don't think you're beating Alabama if they play their best game either. Honestly, so
you're right. But that's a way to kind of delineate. If they come up and they play an above average game, C plus game, then you're going to have a tough time winning that. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
B plus game.
Yeah. Dave, looking at these rankings, I got to ask you, and it's funny because they're dying as a conference. Washington's number 5, Oregon is number 6. Now, if you look at the resumes, Washington has played the second toughest schedule of any undefeated team. Ohio State's played the toughest.
I know. It's like the Pac-12 is doing the win one for the Gipper. thing.
Well,
It's like, go out and have a great year in the last year of existence.
but my question is, how are they down at number? Do you think they're? This is crazy because we used, everybody in the South used to say there's anti-SEC bias. For how many times do we hear that for like 30 years? Is the Pac-12 the new that? Is there anti-Pac-12 bias from the College Football Playoff Committee right now, where they're just like, we can't envision a
I will be
Pac-12?
honest with you. It's funny you brought this up. So I'm laying in my bed at like 1 a.m. on Saturday night, Sunday morning. It was a little bit more difficult for me to get revved up for Pac-12 football, knowing that the conference wasn't going to be around. And usually that's when I watch a lot after the missus goes to sleep and I'll flip around.
That's the most
And I was
exciting.
more apt to watch a highlight show of SEC football than I was to watch a live Pac-12 game. And I'm usually the opposite. And I wondered to myself why I did that. And I thought, well, I mean, they can't win a conference. So let's just see what happens at the end of the year. And if they're around, then you'll be a learned individual about them. But right now, you don't necessarily need to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's affecting the playoff committee. Because there's no way you could look at Washington and not have them at least ahead of Florida State right now. And so now I would have them ahead of Georgia and Michigan because I don't think Georgia and Michigan have enough of a resume. So I'd have Washington at number 2. But now they still control their own destiny because, as you know, Ohio State and Michigan play each other. So if one of them loses and Washington stays undefeated, they're going to the playoff. And so I think they have nothing to worry about with that. But yeah, I gotta be honest. I think there's some and by the way, Pac-12 games, you know this, Dave, most of the sports writers are on the Midwest and East Coast, and Pac-12 games go until 1 or 2 in the morning. I don't think they're watching a lot of these games a lot of time.
Well, I mean, that could be said any year, but is it different this year because of the conference imploding? It is to me a little bit. I don't know if it is to most people. Tennessee Cider Company, the original hard cider of the Smoky Mountains. Use the promo code HAT. That's HAT to receive some free swag with your cider order. Available most anywhere in the U.S. tncidercompany.com. tncidercompany.com. I mean, they don't have a conference to win. So when Caleb, I look at those Pac-12 games, I do think that they probably get short-sighted a little bit as far as their rankings. But when you look at Tennessee at number 13, I told you earlier, it just kind of had that feel of a around top 11 to top 14 team for me based off what I've seen elsewhere. Does Tennessee have a major argument over anybody ahead of it to be higher? Because we are getting to the point where if some crazy things happen, like Ole Miss beats Georgia, then we can start having this conversation. I don't know that you can have it right now, but we're getting close to being at that point. And goodness gracious, after what Tennessee fans went through last year, the last thing you would want is to be number 5 and an Oregon State gets a number 4 spot, and you probably don't know much about them. Is there anybody that Tennessee has a strong argument over being ahead? I'll always say Penn State because I think fundamentally James Franklin programs aren't running the right way. But that's just going to be me if they were 2-1 right now. Anybody else stand out to you?
No, they don't have an argument over anybody, including Penn State, because Tennessee hasn't yet. If they win the next 2 games, they will. But right now, they don't really have. I mean, what's their best win is Kentucky or Texas A&M?
Yeah, and if you go resume, you're 129,000% right.
Yeah, and so yeah, I got to put them at 13 right now. But again, if they win the next 2 weeks, I think you're going to see them leapfrog quite a few teams. And so I think you will see it. And Dave, we're going to start having this conversation. I'm saving this for next week because it may not be a relevant conversation. But if Tennessee finishes like number 5 in the college football playoff ranking or something like that, or loses the East only because but beats Georgia, we're going to start asking if that Florida loss earlier in the year is the worst loss in Tennessee football history.
It's
We're
the
going to
worst
ask.
loss it's the worst loss since 2001 SEC championship game.
Does it surpass South Carolina last year?
Oh no, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but we're going to ask
about that one.
We're going to ask that question if it does, because
Yes.
again, depending on how Florida finishes the season, which it looks like they're going to finish without going to a bowl game. If we find out Tennessee finished 10-2 and they didn't win the East because they lost to a 5-7 Florida team, that will make it the worst loss since the 2001 SEC title game, bar none. And by the way, and the fact that it was to Florida just would have made it even worse.
Yep, absolutely.